Dear listener, thank you for finding your way here. Step into the dark with me. Let's see what we find when the fire dies down. I'm KT, and this is Bramble and Boone. If you've stumbled upon this dark corner, it's likely because you too are drawn to things that happen after the sun goes down. Every town has its shadows, behind every locked door, down every foggy, forgotten road, and buried beneath the soil of seemingly quiet places, there are secrets waiting to be unearthed. This podcast is a quiet space for those who love the mysteries of the past. Together, we will wander into the cold corners of true crime, unearth forgotten dark history, and whisper the eerie regional folklore that has been passed down through many generations. Not just from my home in the Misty Hills, but from dark corners all across the globe. We will look at the mysteries that keep investigators awake at night, the legends that make you double-check the lock on your window, and the true stories of the shadows that walk among us. But this isn't just a podcast. It's a ritual. Before you press play on our upcoming chapters, I want you to make a promise to yourself. Prepare a warm cup of tea, light a single candle, lower the lights, and pull your chair just a tad bit closer to the hearth. Before we step into the dark tonight, we draw a card. The Hermit. A figure standing alone on a frozen peak, holding a single lantern against a vast, consuming darkness. It speaks of deep winter. It speaks of total isolation. But more than anything, it speaks of a quiet, enduring vigil, holding a light for those who were lost in the cold. There is no better card for Watauga County, North Carolina, because if you travel up to Boone, you'll find that the winter of 1972 never really left the mountain. The community here carries a deep, quiet reverence for the lives that were forever altered by that storm. On February 3rd of that year, a massive, unpredicted blizzard rolled over the Blue Ridge Mountains. It didn't just bring snow, it brought a sudden, violent isolation. The temperature dropped below zero in a matter of hours. The wind howled through the gaps, burying the mountain roads under multiple feet of heavy, shifting snowdrifts. By 9 p.m., the county was in a state of total emergency, though few knew it because communication was disappearing around them. The weight of the ice was snapping the old utility lines right out of the frozen ground. Main Street was completely deserted. In a small town where neighbors traditionally looked out for one another, the blizzard effectively built a wall around every single household. If you called out for help, your voice was swallowed by a gale that could be heard for miles, yet left everyone entirely in port. And it was right at this moment, as the storm reached its absolute peak, that a car was crawling up the treacherous, unpaved incline of Clyde Townsend Road. The people inside were moving under the cover of a blizzard that should have brought peace and safety to a quiet home. Instead, they brought a darkness that the town of Boone would spend the next 50 years trying to heal from. At the very top of that treacherous road, sitting quietly in the dense mountain woods, lived the Durhams. To understand the profound shock this night sent through Watauga County, you have to understand who they were to their neighbors. Bryce Durham was 51 years old. In Boone, he was a familiar, trusted face. A successful local businessman who ran the local Buick dealership after moving the family from Mount Airy back in 1969. He wasn't a flashy man, but a quiet provider. Neighbors knew him as the kind of soft-spoken professional who would go out of his way to help you find a reliable vehicle you could actually afford. A man whose word meant something in the high country. His wife, Virginia, was 44 years old. She was the absolute heart of the household. In a rural community where mountain winters could feel deeply isolating, Virginia made their home a sanctuary of warmth. She was deeply devoted to her family and active in her community. On a bitter sub-zero night like this one, with the blizzard violently shaking the house, Virginia was tending to the quiet rhythms of a peaceful home, completely unaware that the safety she cultivated so carefully was about to be breached. And then there was their son, Bobby, just 18 years old. Bobby was a freshman at Appalachian State University, just a short drive down the mountain. He was a young man with his entire life stretching out before him, navigating that exciting transitional year between childhood and adulthood. He still lived at home, balancing his college studies with the familiar, comforting routines of family life. The Durhams weren't public figures with enemies or deep political ties. They were an ordinary, loving family. They owed no money. They kept no dangerous secrets. They represented the exact kind of safe, quiet life that everyone in Boone sought for themselves. This is what made what happened next so profoundly shattering to the community. In a small town, a tragedy like this doesn't just affect the immediate family. It tears a hole in the collective fabric of safety. When a violent crime happens in a city, it is a tragedy. When it happens in a close-knit mountain community, to a family everyone knows, it alters the way every single neighbor looks at the dark outside their windows. For generations, mountain doors had been left unlocked. But after this night, the high country would never feel entirely safe again. It was approximately 11:30 p.m. The blizzard was at its absolute worst. Inside, the phone suddenly rang at the home of Troy Hall, the Durham son-in-law, who lived just a few miles away. When he picked up, Virginia's voice was on the line, but she wasn't screaming. Under the gun of her captors, she had been forced to deliver a lie. She told Troy that Bryce was stranded in the snow with car trouble and needed Troy to come up the mountain to help him. But Virginia managed to lace her words with an unnatural, terrifying panic. Troy knew instantly that this wasn't a routine car breakdown. It was a trap. Before he could press her for details, the line abruptly cut out. On that frozen peak, the darkness completely took over. Frantic with worry since that terrifying, abrupt phone call, Troy Hall and his wife, the Durham's daughter Jenny, refused to wait out the storm. Gathering a neighbor to help navigate the treacherous whiteout, they managed to fight their way up the snow-choked incline of Clyde Townsend Road that very night of February 3rd. When they pulled into the driveway, the house appeared entirely undisturbed from the outside. Heavy, pristine pillows of white snow sat perfectly on the roof. But there was already one glaring discrepancy. Bryce's Buick station wagon was entirely missing from the property. The moment Troy and his companions stepped through the front door, The illusion of peace shattered completely. The air inside the house was freezing, matching the sub-zero temperatures outside. The interior was in total, violent chaos. This was not a clinical, untouched crime scene. The home had been systematically and thoroughly ransacked. Drawers were pulled out and flipped over, belongings were strewn across floors, and furniture was displaced. The killers had torn the house apart. Navigating through the dark, shadowed, upturned hallways to the back of the house, Troy made a discovery in the family bathroom that would haunt Watauga County for the next 50 years. Bryce, Virginia, and Bobby were found together in the family bathroom. The utter cruelty of the scene left an indelible mark on investigators. All three victims bore severe, identical rope burns around their necks, showing signs of torture. The medical examiner would later reveal that Virginia had been actively strangled to death. Bryce and Bobby, however, survived the initial strangulation attempt, only to be murdered when the killers submerged them headfirst into the water-filled tub, effectively drowning them. The crime scene laid bare the brutal nature of the intruders. They hadn't stumbled into the home by accident looking for shelter from the storm. They were traveling predators. They had bypassed the entire town, navigated a blizzard up a mountain road, breached the house, torn it apart, carried out their dark purpose, and vanished back into the whiteout using the family's own stolen station wagon to make their escape. In the eyes of the law, the killers had driven out into the snow and ceased to exist. For the next 50 years, the Durham files sat on a shelf in the Watauga County Sheriff's Office, collecting dust. When the snow finally melted in the spring of 1972, it didn't reveal any answers. The stolen Buick wagon was eventually recovered abandoned, and inside it, police found the family's stolen silverware, confirming that simple, ruthless greed drove the slaughter. In a tight-knit mountain town where everyone knew everyone, the silence was agonizing. The unsolved murders of Bryce, Virginia, and Bobby became a heavy, permanent cloud hanging over the beautiful Blue Ridge. A town that once prided itself on hospitality suddenly grew suspicious. For the first time in history, people in Watauga County started locking their doors at night. Neighbors looked at neighbors sideways, wondering if a monster was walking among them in plain sight. The rumors tore the community apart. In the chaotic weeks following the tragedy, early reports and wild local rumors pointed in every direction, leading investigators to quickly arrest 4 white men shortly after the crime. But with no physical evidence linking them to the home, those charges were dropped, and then the men were released. Every subsequent lead over decades hit a brick wall. As the years ground on, the rumor mill even weaponized itself against the very person who found them, their son-in-law, Troy Hall. Because there was no forced entry, and because the final decoy call was placed to his home, local gossip whispered that he was the inside man. The whispers only intensified when years later, Hall moved to Georgia, became an attorney, and established a practice just 30 minutes from where the hitmen operated. Though it would eventually be proved that Hall had absolutely no part in the crime, the dark coincidence fueled true crime speculation for half a century. For decades, Every single path led to a brick wall. The original detectives on the case grew old, retired, and passed away without ever finding peace. The file was handed down to a second generation of law enforcement, and then a third, becoming North Carolina's most infamous ghost story. And then there was the family left behind. The Durham's daughter, Jenny, had to carry the unimaginable weight of unresolved grief. To lose your mother, father, and teenage brother is a horror no one should ever endure. To live half a century without knowing why or who is a slow, agonizing torture. The community held annual vigils. They refused to let the names of Bryce, Virginia, and Bobby fade into a forgotten statistic. They kept the lantern lit, just like the Hermit, waiting for a thaw that felt like it would never come. Decades passed in total, freezing silence. The house on Clyde Townsend Road was eventually sold, passing through new hands, but the shadow of February 1972 never truly left the mountain. People began to accept that the truth was buried in the graves of the killers, but secrets have a way of outliving the people who keep them. And 50 years later, that ice finally began to crack. The massive breakthrough didn't come from a new forensic test or a clue found in the dirt of Watauga County. It came from the lowcountry of Georgia. Through a completely separate investigation into one of the most brutal criminal organizations in American history, the Dixie Mafia. To understand the Dixie Mafia, you have to understand that they weren't a traditional blood-tied family like the Italian mob. As their leaders once described them, they were a loose, secular confederation of traveling Southern criminals. Moonshiners, car thieves, and safecrackers who realized they could make a lethal, highly lucrative living doing contract muscle work, bank robberies, and hits across the Southeast. They targeted wealthy local businessmen like Bryce, who owned a successful car dealership, under the belief that they kept large sums of cash hidden at home. In May 2019, the White County Sheriff's Office in Georgia contacted Watauga officials with a stunning tip. Shane Burt, the son of infamous Dixie Mafia leader and hitman Billy Sunday Burt, shared a memory during a research interview for a book. He recalled his father telling him during a prison visit about a time he had killed 3 people in the North Carolina mountains during a heavy snowstorm, noting that they had almost gotten caught. Following this lead, Watauga County detectives tracked down and conducted a series of in-person interviews between 2019 and 2021 with an aging inmate named Billy Wayne Davis. At 81 years old, Davis was the lone surviving member of the crew, already serving a life sentence in Georgia for an entirely separate murder. During those interviews, Davis cracked the case wide open. He confessed that the triple homicide had been a professional, hired extraction job. Davis claimed that he had acted strictly as the getaway driver, staying with the vehicle, while 3 other ruthless Dixie Mafia enforcers entered the home that night. Billy Sunday Burt, Bobby Jean Gaddis, and Charles David Reed. They chose the absolute worst blizzard of the decade to strike, knowing the weather would trap the victims inside and help wash away their tracks. For investigators, the final piece of the puzzle that solidified the truth was a chilling piece of criminal history: the 1973 Fleming case in Rennes, Georgia. Just a year after the Durham murders, an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Reed Oliver Fleming Sr., were targeted in their home and brutally strangled by these exact same four men: Burt, Davis, Gaddis, and Reed. The modus operandi matched perfectly, proving that the Boone murders were the work of a seasoned clinical robbery and extraction crew. Aside from Davis, the other three men had already taken their secrets to the grave. And while the exact local mastermind who provided the tip about the Durham's supposed wealth remains a mystery, the terrifying question of exactly who walked up that mountain was finally answered. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a random drifter. It was a cold-blooded professional transaction carried out by the Dixie Mafia. For the community of Boone, and most importantly for Jenny and the surviving family, the revelation brought a devastating, heavy kind of peace. It didn't bring Bryce, Virginia, or Bobby back. It didn't erase 50 years of empty chairs at Christmases or the decades of agonizing unanswered questions. But it proved that the truth can outlast the dark. It proved that a community's refusal to forget can eventually crack even the coldest cases. "50 years later, the files are finally closed, the vigil is over, the lantern can be put down. But we will remember their names: Bryce, Virginia, and Bobby." I'm KT, your trusted narrator, and this has been Bramble and Boone.